Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Grew, co-founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
Hi, my name is Lucas Blondheim. I'm a UX designer, product designer. Spent about 10 years at Boston Consulting Group, and then I spent a couple of years at IBM designing for the Salesforce platform. And then for the past 3 years, I've been running my own design studio called Fennec Design Studio. And we're focusing on the Salesforce platform, but also climate tech technologies and just general user research and design.
Yeah, so thanks again, Lucas, for joining us. We've had some folks in the creative arts space on before from Hollywood and video editors and designers. And I think this is an area, I think with the AI generation and that sort of thing, that it's really going to be hit hard from the AI use space. I think what Lucas and I are going to touch on in this conversation is the human touch is going to get more and more important. People are going to yearn for the more human created items, human created things. We're already kind of seeing that pushback on AI generated content. And I think there's always going to be a fine balance. In our prep call, we talked about finding that fine balance where you're utilizing the automation tool sets and things like that, but that artistic touch is still there and the humans are still kind of doing it. And Lucas is great because he's into educating and helping others in his space understand the possibilities, understand what's coming, and how to prepare for that, much like others we've talked to in the creative space. And so can't wait for this conversation.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point about the automation. I mean, I think everyone came to the AI gold rush thinking, well, all of our work is going to be easier and none of us are going to have to do anything and all that stuff. And but to be fair, there is some automations to be had there and there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done. But when everything's the same, then how do you stand out? And that's really the issue right now is, how do you stand out as a designer? How do you stand out as a business development person when the messaging all starts to look the same or your designs all start to look the same? And so having that human touch is going to be key moving forward. I mean, I'm seeing it with my daughters right now. Like they won't engage with anything that's AI. They're just like, I don't want to do it. They want to do their own creativity and their own thing. So that's what I'm seeing a lot in the business world too.
Yeah, I think it is a gold rush, as you say, and the open AIs and the Googles and the Amazons and Microsofts of the world, they're selling pickaxes during the gold rush, right? So they're going to tell you that AI is going to do everything it can for you. And I think as we find out, the LLMs have kind of reached the end of their potential with how we currently train, with how we currently build those solutions. And, GPT-5 is not as big of a leap from as GPT-4 was from GPT-3. And I think we're just going to see that. It's going to be slow improvements with LLMs. I think what we're going to talk about today is much like what we preach is more catered solutions, a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer to solve those problems and to help build and punch above your weight class, like we like to say. It is really interesting. You have an interesting background as well, coming from corporate America and then having your own startup, for lack of a better word, and the boutique, I believe, is what we've talked about. And can you just talk about like why you made that transition and why you thought it was important now, in recent years? And as I'm sure, much like we did, you kind of predicted we were going to be here. It wasn't 100% accurate, but you kind of knew this was coming. But at the same time, there are a lot of unknowns, and so it's not exactly the best time to jump out, but it's not the worst time either.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. It's like I feel like what I get out of being on my own and running my own studio is that I get to sort of shape the work in the way that I want to more directly. When you're, in big corporate, like you might be 10 layers removed from any of the decision making. In some ways, you're a cog and you actually have to build the skill to be the cog. And I kind of didn't like building that skill to be a cog. I kind of wanted to still have my creative edge and still be able to do the work. While communication and diplomacy are important in design, the higher up I got in corporate America, the less design I was doing and the more politics I was taking part in. And there's a time and place for that. There are people for that and they are important for that. But I just felt like my skill set is better suited to talking to users, making things and solving problems on the ground.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of synergies in our backgrounds as well, because I did the same thing. I was going the executive track, corporate America, and I walked away from it mainly because I didn't like the politics of it. I'm a problem solver. I love helping people. And I think the larger the organization, the more silos, the bigger roadblocks you have to hurdle. I love working with mid-market companies. That's what we call, that's the folks we focus on, $1 billion and below, 1,500 employees below. Don't have a lot of dedicated technology people or design people and things like that. So they have to have people wear many different hats. But the beauty is you have decision makers in the room, or decision makers one phone call away or 2 or 3 doors away. And I think that's where that's the beauty, is these tools are going to help organizations like that compete with those big enterprises, but be far more nimble and to like a punch above the weight class with what we say. And I think you folks like yourself who are helping evangelize and teach people what's possible are really, really important. So thank you for that. Let's talk about let's just set the base standards for folks who maybe don't know the design world. I do. I forayed into. I've been using Photoshop since like CS2, which is early
So was
2000s.
it this?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I may have downloaded on a wars site back in the day. I can't confirm or deny that
Oh,
back
really?
when yeah. But let's talk about just the basics of defining what digital experience and digital experience design is, what UI, UIX is, and like how these help the business world and frame the narratives that these corporations and businesses are trying to take. I think a lot of people just think, oh, graphic design is graphic design or UIX design is UIX design. But I think we've all used software solutions that are designed terribly and we've all used them designed great. The iPhone, for all of its flaws as an ecosystem, being a walled garden, it's idiot proof, for lack of a better term, right? Like, and why that's so much better than others. Just take a couple minutes just for the layman's and to kind of lay that base, so as we go down to further conversations, they understand a little bit.
Sure, and I think there's a misconception sometimes, especially with even the terms UI, UX. That, oh, this is just a visual craft. That this is just a visual layer that somebody needs to come in, and once all the big decisions have been made, then design comes in and makes it pretty, and that's just not the case. Design is fundamentally a problem-solving craft and skill, and it's fundamentally a skill that you develop and then you infuse it. That the beauty of the UI or making it pretty is just one small element of whether or not the experience itself is designed well. So I guess back to your question though, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah,
Sorry
so
about
just
that.
basically gives some basic context of what UI and UX is for the layman, and why that's important, especially probably going to be more important because, as we've seen, whenever you do, AI generated, you know, UI elements or AI generated things, there's just a little bit, it's something's a little bit off about it, right? Any UI or AI related image creation, there's just something uncanny valley about it, right? And why we still need that human touch.
Yeah, and part of it is because of these vibe coding tools and these AI tools that are generating user interfaces are primarily using the same styling assets or classes that everyone else is using. So there's nothing unique about them, which is why they start to look a little bit like, I don't know, like cereal, like Cheerios. They're all the same sort of elements in one big bowl. But I think where you need to have some of that human touch is you can use these tools to get 8% of the way there. But then you need that extra 20% to craft and refine it. And I think that's one reason why we're also coming up with all this work slop or AI slop is because people are not addressing that last 20%. They're producing something, they're passing it off as completed work, and they're saying, "Hey, you handle this." And they're making it someone else's problem to refine or to fix or something like that. And so I think design becomes important and taste becomes important. And taste again is not just about how something looks. It's about how something feels, how something functions, how smooth it is, or how jarring, how long it takes to load. All of these things make up the experience, and you just can't relegate that to AI. So it's going to be an important craft moving forward, even if the design field itself right now is in a bit of a slump, I think.
Yeah, and I think I love that the user design experience. Folks don't realize, like you kind of mentioned, like the UI elements or the visual aspect of it is just a very small part of that. Another huge part of it is user flow, right? Which we specialize in standard operating procedures, SOPs, or
Yeah.
or just operational flows. Like, how can we improve design, improve efficiency, remove steps, remove those sort of things? Can you touch base on, like, especially how AI they don't understand how humans think and how humans want? And so whenever you're trying to design the user flow, and for the folks that don't understand what I'm talking about, whenever you go through like a sign up process on a website and you have to go through 5 different pages and hit next, what that onboarding process is, or what it is to go change your user avatar in an app. I think there's an art to that. And the seamless ones, like, you don't even realize you're going to a different page, right? It just all feels like the same single pane of glass. And like, especially how that user journey is extremely important. And then how optimizing that is kind of a never ending process.
Yeah, and I one of the good examples that I like to use is just basically anything to do with government. Government websites
Yeah.
are
Sam.gov. Like,
yeah,
go.
it's notoriously bad. And this is just one example of why they're bad. It's that there are all these disconnected systems and they're not passing information between one another.
Hmm.
So you go to one site and you fill in all of your information, your name, your email address, your address, your social security number, whatever it might be. You fill in all that information and then it says, okay, now that you've done that, click save. And then it kicks you out to another site where you have to input the same information. And then this continues over and over and over again. And that is the process of user experience design, is assessing what that workflow looks like and consolidating where possible all of those steps so that you're not making the user do all of these things and fill in information that you already have as a government or as an entity or as a corporate company. You don't need to provide that information multiple times. So, the process of user experience design and product design is mapping what the current state is and then mapping what a future state could be and designing that out and proving it out and then testing it with users. When it comes to AI though, what's been happening now is that even the UX design process, that entire process has been collapsed from like weeks and months to hours and days at
Hmm.
this point. And so you can still do those things. You can still do the standard UX process, but you are doing it sometimes in, like I said, hours or days, and you're doing it on your own. You may not even have any team members. So that's sort of the paradigm shift that we're facing right now with AI and user experience.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point, and something I kind of want to drill down into a little bit is I love the fact that these, because we say that basically AI and automation, especially LLMs and things like that, they free you up to focus on more meaningful work. And from a UI UX perspective, like, working with your columns or moving at something 17 pixels one way or 32 pixels the other way, I think I've done that myself. That's not really meaningful work, right? You want the bigger picture. And so I think using these tools to get that 80% there, and then the last 20%, you can focus on that user experience, that user journey, the user feedback, work on the back end data and analytics to improve upon those things. Is that how you see utilizing these tools is helping, or are there other ways that I'm not looking at as a non-designer myself?
Yeah, no. That's definitely one of the ways, just the actual act of designing the interface is a lot faster now. But the other way that I've been using AI is, for example, I was on this project several weeks ago where we were talking with a large bicycle manufacturing company, and they make bicycle components. And we had to do, I think it was like 23 interviews with different users and business stakeholders. What we ended up doing was leveraging transcripts from every single one of those interviews, dropping them into a knowledge repository. And I think it was Google Notebook LM that we used. And then we started asking the AI to say, hey, what are the top 10 pain points across all of these different user types? And you get that cross section in seconds versus what used to take days and weeks of analysis and synthesis and understanding now. So we're collapsing, user research down into a much smaller window. And, then we're to generating user stories. And, if you're familiar with software development, part of the process is creating user stories to help, the development team understand what they're actually trying to create. And we can create all of that stuff in mere minutes. So again, back to the idea that we are focusing on the real work, and the real work is talking to users. And that should be the focus. So we spent, 30 hours interviewing users, but then we spent, you know, I don't know, maybe a few hours, maybe 5 to 10 hours, putting all those themes together, pulling out those insights and then categorizing them and then driving user stories from that and then double checking it. And that's the other thing too, is you got to go back and double check this stuff. It's
Hmm.
like LLMs hallucinate. And so again, it's back to that 80%. It got us 80% of the way there. And then we're going to spend 20% of the time going back and looking at this and making sure it's accurate.
That's awesome. Yeah, we preach Notebook LM a lot. Notebooklm.google.com for folks. It'll be in the show notes, and then also in the newsletter on LinkedIn. And we love it because it's a black box. It only takes in the data that you have provided with PDFs or Word documents and stuff like that, and you can chat with that data basically.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because it doesn't take data from outside sources like an LLM would, and it's just great from a research perspective. So thank you for bringing that up because that is a great use case, and we do that too as well. So whenever we have our discovery sessions or our user meetings, we record them all. We use Microsoft Copilot, and we just take the transcript, upload it to Notebook LM, and then that same sort of thing. You could take 20 or 30 different meetings, and then within minutes you can get a pretty good idea of everything. But again, like you said, you need that spit and polish at the end, right? That 20% of work. But instead of crunching all of that information for 2 or 3 days, we can spend an extra 2 or 3 days with meeting more people and understanding more problems. I love what you say is like focus on the users. We call them boots on the ground, right? The folks who are doing the day-to-day work, the ones that are actually living the pain points. Middle management and upper management, they don't really understand those pain points. And again, that's one reason we love working with mid-market companies too, is because we have access to those frontline workers. And I think that's really great. from that perspective, can you just think from a designer perspective, or is there anything that designers across the board are getting wrong about AI, or are folks kind of understanding the power of that now?
I mean, I think there's still some fear out there, and it's not unfounded. We're all bombarded with a lot of hype right now about what AI can and will do, and what it's going to do, and how it's going to take all of our jobs and everything. So I think that there's some fear that is not unfounded, but I think one of the best antidotes to fear is knowledge. You know, learn, go and explore these things, try them out, fail at them a little bit. As a designer, you have to be willing, or I mean, just anybody working these days, you have to be willing to try something, not know, and fail, and learn. I mean, it's literally the way that we're going to be moving forward. And so for designers in the space now, I would say, you know, keep trying things, keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep trying to make things and have it break, and do this stuff on your own time too, because you know, when I was in corporate, I learned far less in corporate than I have in the 2 years that I've been on my own, because it's forced me to learn at the speed of available knowledge. And when you're in corporate, most of the time you don't have a lot of time. You are beholden to what they want you to do. And so for designers, I would just say keep exploring and keep trying things, and look up what these tools are doing, and what you can try. Figma Make is great to play around with. I've been working with Lovable and Claude Code, Cursor, V0, you know, all these things.
Yeah, and I would add aistudio.google.com or Google AI Studio. You can get a base, you can tell it I want to use, a certain theme set or Bootstrap or something along those lines. You tell it I want to use a TypeScript website and like point it and give it a screenshot of another website and build one for you really quickly. I would say use these tools. I mean, they're not the enemy. AI is not the enemy to me. It's a valuable tool. And from this perspective, I look at it as a competitor. So if it can build something really great, I will say, okay, I can one up you AI, right? Like I can use it. Iron sharpens iron is what they say, right? So whenever someone builds a tool, they're like, hey, I can build a website that looks as good as yours within 10 minutes with Google AI Studio, and they bring it up and they have it running in the cloud in 10 minutes. And then, but the performance is probably bad. The classes are probably named incorrectly. From a scalability perspective, especially from an enterprise scale or security and governance, like we both know that right out of the box, that 5-minute website's not going to be up to the standards from a Sarbanes-Oxley company that, a publicly traded company that has to pass audits and things. And so
Really.
keep that in mind. And so can we, I guess that's a great pivot from that perspective, from a human centered perspective for AI and what human centered design really means in this AI augmented world.
Sure. I mean, you kind of have to build for your scenario. If you're a solopreneur and you literally all you need is a presence online to indicate that you're open for business, then you know what? One of these tools is probably all you really need. You know, you're not going to need to have the souped up security and the productized website and everything. But if you're using these tools in your business to build a website for a public company or something like that, you're going to need to make sure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's and all that stuff, and making sure that everything's properly set up and secure. So again, these vibe coding tools are just that, tools to to get to the next level of understanding, to get to the next level of fidelity. And then, you've really got to do the work that everyone expects of you after that.
Yeah, and I think you bring a good point. Like you have to use the tools that are right for the job, and sometimes you need a sledgehammer, sometimes you need a scalpel. And if you are a solopreneur or a small company, you can fly by the seat of your pants, right? You could build those guardrails as you're building the train going down the tracks. And I think that's a really great idea. Like automation is a great perspective. You can take an open source tool like N8N. You can do some really great stuff from a marketing perspective and things that wouldn't necessarily fly in a mid-market company or business world, because you have to be a little bit more safe, a little bit more grounded, a little bit more risk adverse. But that doesn't mean those tools also don't scale up to work in that perspective. But you need to have, you need to bring in a security expert, and you need to bring in folks from the accounting team to understand how you're going to be utilizing these things. So it's great to say that. I'm glad you do that. You use the tool that's right for the job you're trying to solve, and you can be a far more nimble the smaller your company, smaller your organization, but the same tools scale up.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too that I would say is that a lot of these AI tools, at least this has been my experience, is that they're really built for one person who's sitting there using them. I've not seen that many tools out there that are AI native, that are generative, that are made to help teams collaborate and work together on generative AI. And maybe I haven't been exposed to them yet, but my experience so far has been they're very much They're very good at helping individual productivity. I don't know how good they are so far at helping organizational productivity get better. I think maybe that's down the road, and part of that is because we talked about this, Brad, in the pre-session that we had. But a lot of these big companies are not ready for this. They're not. Their data is not ready. Their governance is not ready. They don't have the guardrails in place. They don't have the security predicates in place. They're just not ready for predictive agentic AI in the way that it's being hyped up right
Yeah, and I that's a great thing, and we could talk about what AI can't do, and that's empathy, context, nuance, and vision. And like you said, you brought up it's great for one person or person in a team working, maybe two people if you share some prompts and things, but for the most part, that context is individual to the user and individual to their session. There are some tools out there like Microsoft Copilot where you can create these government-based wikis and things like that, but unless you're creating a black box catered LLM or something, like you said, it's very hard to, if you have four different team members ask this, prompt Claude for the same thing four times, you may get four different answers. And that's hard to scale. Basically, it's hard to scale that across an entire organization, and that's where again that human touch is going to be really, really important because to maintain that context across a team or across a division.
Yeah. And, coming back to the idea of being human centered, I mean, that is a human centered design problem. Like, if we're not designing for collaboration amongst teams, that's a design problem. Like, we need to focus on how these tools serve teams, not just what can it generate for the one person who's giving the prompt. Making sure that when these LLMs and these tools are designed, that we're designing them with shared context in mind, so that people on a team can have shared context about a particular project or a particular problem. I'm working on this product right now called Orchestrate, and it is, we're building it right now so that small nimble teams can have shared context even if they don't have shared chat threads, so that we're all working off the same database, we're all working off the same shared context, but I get to have my chats private from your chats, et cetera. And so that's really going to be the multiplier, the force multiplier. But we're just not there yet in terms of the designs of a lot of these tools. And that's where I think design can really shape the next generation of tools that we have.
Yeah, and for small business owners like myself, and then folks who are starting up, entrepreneurs thinking about starting up their own business, and maybe just decision makers in the mid market or even a small enterprise. Can you discuss like why design will remain a vital business differentiator, and why just going on ThemeForest or something like that and getting a WordPress design that someone's used 1,000 times over that's been creating your website from that? Why is that unique design identity from a business perspective important even for the small business?
Well, I think it comes back to really when you're focused on your ICP. If you're in the business world, your ICP is the ideal customer profile, and like, if you don't focus your content, I mean, it's down to the word choice that you're having on your website. Yes, you can have a template, but if your choice of words and who you're targeting and how you are messaging your offer to people is about human centric design, because you're centering it on your specific user, your specific target. Templates just can't do that. They can give you a framework. Again, they can give you a framework, get you 80% of the way there, but design will be the differentiator because it will be intentionally specific. And AI is mostly patterns. So design is really about getting specific and intentional about the people that you're talking to and the people that you're serving. And that's human centered design.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up the AI as patterns, because I think we've all seen LinkedIn over the last, since basically GPT-4 came out. People are all posting these amazingly well written posts, but they all sound the same, right? They're all coming from the same three or four models with, using the same sources and things like that. And like, yeah, again, people probably get about 80% there and put their little spit and polish on there. At the end of the day, it's you can just tell it's not coming from the heart, right? You can just tell that it's not you know what we actually were yearning for. And with design, I imagine that's very much the same.
Yeah. And I mean, design too is really about connection. I mean, it's about understanding each other, it's about, you know, making sure that we are each being heard in a conversation and that we are exchanging ideas as opposed to, just throwing slop up against the wall, because that is exactly what LinkedIn feels like right now. I did an experiment the other day where I was like, yeah, my content isn't performing as well as I thought. And I was using generative AI to create some of the content, but then to your point, I was using my own brain to sort of polish it and massage it a little bit. And then I thought, you know what, let me just try an experiment here. And I made this post and I was like, it was just a picture of me. And then I was like, I told this really terrible joke. And that landed, that had far more reach and far more engagement than anything I'd put out there. And it had nothing to do with any of the work that I'm doing. It was like some stupid joke, like I just had a fight with a grizzly bear and I with a pair of chopsticks in my bare hands or something. And then, and I said, you know what it taught me about B2B sales and professional services? I said, nothing. I'm dead. And that was all it was. And that performed better than a lot of my other stuff. So again, I think people are looking for connection. They're not looking for patterns. They're not looking for templates. They want to connect with others.
Yeah, they're looking for things they're not seeing everywhere else, right? Like I think that's the huge thing is if everything's cookie cutter, then nothing's unique. And yeah, I found that too. That like even whenever I do write the blog post myself or the LinkedIn post myself, and it is I'm doing my research and citing my sources and things like that. It's people. I think what's going to go forward, as much like you said, is going to be those shorter posts that don't look like they're auto generated, that don't look like they're coming from an LLM, and that they're easier to digest to, and then easier to relate to. Like sales is the single hardest thing I've ever done in my life is sales, and I mentioned that last episode, and so like that post definitely resonates with me too.
Yeah. And I would even agree with you that sales is the single hardest thing I've ever had to work on too. It's just not easy. And I think it's not easy in general, but I think it's really incredibly hard now in
Hmm.
the world of AI because everyone thought that marketing and sales was going to be so freaking easy now that we can, because we have all these automation tools and we can generate content at the drop of a hat and it'll be really easy to make sales. But what has happened is we've just flooded the zone. So everyone tunes out now. And so now the differentiator is authenticity, real connection, real stories, real value first. And that is incredibly hard to scale and make repeatable. And which is why I think sales is just difficult right now.
Yep. My LinkedIn inbox is 95% cold messages from automated systems like N8N or one of those other things. And I'm like, how does this actually work? I'm guessing it does, and it's just a numbers game. But again, I think with design, it's probably much the same. Initially, people were like, "Oh, I can get that website for $500 instead of $5,000, so that we'll take this slop." And then I think they'll have buyer's remorse as there's thousands of websites that look exactly like those. And so, it's a great conversation thus far. I think now we can kind of pivot to tools, trends, and tech for modern designers, and like how we can empower designers who are looking to upskill themselves, who are looking to give themselves superpowers and stand out from others while they keep their personal brand and personal touch while also utilizing these new tools to do that 80% of the menial tasks to focus on that 20% that's the most meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm trying right now, and again, these are all new, so we're all experimenting, but what I'm trying right now is actually trying to use these tools to get better outcomes in my designs more quickly by way of actually workshopping my prompts
Hmm.
and workshopping with ChatGPT, for example. And then what I'll do is in that in that conversation, I'll say, I need to make a Figma make prompt that will really intentionally use the component in the library that I'm giving you and the styles and the classes that of that library. And these are the personas, getting really super clear on
Hmm.
what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do. And oddly enough, then design is becoming, for me anyway, right now it's becoming more of a writing exercise even more than a design exercise. And so, yes, you still have to know how to, use Figma and you have to understand code a little bit and you have to have this background in design, but I'm spending far less time pushing pixels around than I am now. I'm shaping my conversations and what I'm telling Figma Make to make.
Yeah, the prompt creation, the prompt orchestration is extremely important because you need to remove that nuance, right? If you don't remove nuance and if you don't remove the gray areas and like, hey, they'll just figure it out, it's going to just put in what's the most popular. And so if you have a specific color palette you want to work with, or if you have a specific UI framework that you want to utilize, if you have a specific language you want to utilize, where on any of the JavaScript libraries, pick whatever one you want. You need to be very specific with all the things. The back end, are you going to use a PostgreSQL or MySQL or
Super
um, Supabase? Yeah, Supabase is huge. We love Supabase. That's what we build most of our solutions on. You need to build those things out, and so spend 2, 3, 4 hours building out your architecture basically, or your overall framework for your prompt, and then utilize that and create that context, create that black box, where it's a walled garden and you don't have any other, create a new workspace or whatever in whatever tool you're utilizing. And then also use all the different variations of the tools you have access to, and then pick and choose which ones actually work. That's the thing is, like you said, this is all new to us. We're all experimenting. So you can't really be married to a tool, because they all just change every single day. There's a new version out and a new something. And so I literally have like 6 tabs pinned in my browser of all the different models, and all the different services we use, and just kind of go from there. And like what worked for me yesterday is not going to work for me today. And I think that's the big thing too, is with scaling this, and why this is going to get harder and harder to scale until there are the solutions like you're building, where you have this context that's specific to how our organization works. Is every time one of these models changes, how you did things before can't be repeated. I used to keep track of all the prompts I used in the past and the model I used, and then then
The
ChatGPT
models
or
change.
and then OpenAI comes out and they kill off 4, and everybody, and then they brought it back after everybody complained. But like whenever that changed, it literally undid months of, this groundwork that people were doing. And so just keep all of that in mind. Take meticulous notes is what I'd say. And then so hopefully you can reproduce it whenever these things do change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing too, because the days of setting it and forgetting it are
Hmm.
over.
Yep.
Whether it was a career that you were setting and forgetting, or whether it was a specific skill, the name of the game now is learning. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about having a growth mindset, but that is super important. Not just because it will get you new skills and it'll keep you relevant in the workplace, but it'll keep you sane.
Hmm.
Because if you don't have that growth mindset, you are going to start feeling that you're atrophying and start telling yourself that story. And that is not good for anyone's mental health, self-confidence, self-esteem, all that stuff. You've got to keep learning and keep expanding your knowledge.
Yeah, agreed. And we preach that constantly. It's why we started this podcast. Is again, how we did things last week is going to be completely different than how we do them next week. And that's just a way of life going forward. Getting your college degree, spending 30 years at a company, and retiring peacefully. Unless you're a doctor or like a really specialized engineer, that's probably not going to happen, right? You're going to just have to continuously pivot, more than Dr. J, is what I like to say. Like you're going to have to just, but the beauty is you have the tools to help you learn. That's the one beauty about AI. It's a tool that's trained to help you learn more about how to utilize it.
Yep.
But we've never had that before. Before, I tell people all the time, people listening to this are probably tired of hearing it, but I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And so whenever I was in high school, my dad said, son, if anybody ever asks you if you know how to do something, say yes, because someone's written a book on it. So I had to know the Dewey Decimal System and learn how to check out a book at the library. And then, the internet came and we had Wikipedia came around, and then Google came around. That was game changing. And then YouTube, holy crap. So you could still figure out pretty much anything you want in the world over time. That was all out there. And then now these models literally give it to you in seconds, in the
Second.
palm of your hand. And so there's really no excuses other than, you're just pushing back and putting your head in the sand. It's like, oh, I'm not going to take part in this. It doesn't matter if you want to take part in it, because we're a capitalistic society. And if there's money to be saved, people are going to save that money. So you need to use these tools to help differentiate yourself. And if I can do it, and if Lucas can do it, you can do it. That's the overall,
Yeah, I think that would definitely be the message that I'd send to, is like, you can do this. You all can
mhm,
do this. And you just gotta put in, and it's uncomfortable. It's not comfortable. I'll say that right now. Like
mhm.
it's it can feel very unsettling sometimes to go through these things. But I like your idea of just saying yes. And in some ways that's literally what Chat GPT does. It can be a little sycophantic too, where like, yeah, you were so right. And then but it moves the thing to the next phase, which is asks you another question. Well, what about this? Or can I provide you with this? And that is the same approach we all need to take with exploring these tools. Is what else could I do with this?
Mhm.
Okay, what else could happen? And go and find that out and explore that.
Yeah, never be satisfied, never be content, because there's always going to be a better way to do it. I think that's the hugest thing. And so now that we've talked about the tools and how people can adapt to that, let's talk about the industry shift and adapting to that change, and the new responsibility the new responsibilities of designers, around strategy, ethics, and communication specifically. How are ethics playing in this role? Again, we've talked to folks from like Hollywood, and like, are we using, people's voices? Are we using their likeness? That kind of thing. From a design perspective, I know in the past, for years, have used like dribble.com as whenever I need to design something, go get some inspiration from other places. And now you can literally copy and paste or take a screenshot and say, hey, Google AI Studio, design me a website that looks exactly like this, but make it about cars instead of computers. And you can literally just steal an entire design. From an ethical perspective, where are you kind of seeing that happening? in this space?
This is a really, really tough question, because on one hand, I feel like it has opened up the floodgates for people who might not have ever created something to try and create something and to tap into their creativity. On the flip side of that, these tools were built on, the work of others that may not have been, more than likely were not compensated for, or and so it's definitely one of those things where it's a very personal decision, I think, and how much you want to engage with them, how far you're willing to go. Because there's a lot of, I've been in rooms where there's just some unethical stuff being discussed too, and about how we're going to approach these things. And, we all have to sort of look at these and say, hey, how far am I willing to let this go? How far am I willing to participate? That's a personal decision. But I think that we all need to be continually asking ourselves those questions, though, and I think we don't have the luxury of not asking that anymore if we ever did. I think it's too in your face, it's too palpable, and it's too, um, momentous right now. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, I think it answers it as best as you can because I don't think any of us have an answer to that question, right? Like, how do we handle this? Like, I love the fact that I can go to ChatGPT and like remember a book, like The Martian, and say, "Hey, give me the synopsis of The Martian," and it dumps it out. But I know they didn't pay for the rights to do that. I know they didn't pay for like, "Hey, summarize the Harry Potter saga for me." They didn't pay for those rights, and so much like from a design perspective, they scraped all of the design websites, getting all these ideas for UI UX design to teach these models how to do those same sorts of things. And so it's a tough question. It's a morally gray area for sure. But again, I think the cat's already out of the bag. Those damage has already been done. So utilize these tools, especially if you can do fight for the good. I tell folks it's really important to listen to this podcast, to get involved in your local communities, learning more about AI, your local colleges, your local meetups, because it's going to take the common people doing the right thing to stand up to the, Zuckerbergs and the Musks and the Altmans of the world who literally just are looking at this from a monetary perspective. I think I was talking to a PhD who's geneticist this morning that's going to be on an episode in the future. And like we were talking like, this is literally going to cure cancer. So to me, I think all of this ethical dilemmas are worth it for that. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it's the math proves it out, right? We're going to solve the world's most complex problems once we have enough energy and once you have enough sort of things. And so I think from that perspective, it's worth it, but we are going to break a few eggs, and like we need to do the best we can as individuals to speak up when that happens. So maybe with someone who is a storied experience as yourself, decades long, and especially in large organizations, what would your words from a junior designer, or someone who's just getting into this, or someone who's in a lower position in the company who sees these types of things, what would you give them if you were in their shoes? Like, how would you navigate those murky waters?
and when you say see these types of things, maybe some of the ethical dilemmas or the
Yeah,
moral
yeah, definitely.
you're coming into, yeah.
I know it's a tough question, so sorry if
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot with it.
Well, it's a good question. I'll tell you what I did. And I came to a point where I knew that I didn't want to be the decision maker in those decisions anymore. And so I have decided that I'm going to focus my design studio and my efforts on social impact, climate tech, things that are going to have a positive influence on society. And I would say that, every designer needs to have that same conversation with themselves and say, what am I willing to participate in? Because the reality is, and you mentioned it earlier, we are in a capitalist society. If you don't want to do any harm, you might as well shrink and never engage in anything ever again. That obviously is not an option. And so again, it becomes about your own coming to terms with your own comfort about what you're willing to tolerate, what you're willing to engage with. And I would even go so far as this goes for people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos too. Like they've clearly asked that question of themselves and they've made their decision. And so, we all have to do the same thing, regardless of what they've decided. And so that's sort of where I would give designers give that advice, is to say, ask yourself what you're willing to tolerate and how far you're willing to go. And when you've reached that limit, make the choice to walk away if you need to. In whatever walking away looks like in your particular scenario.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it's something I did myself as well. I left several jobs because being in Fortune 500 companies for basically my entire career, there were just a lot of things I disagreed with, and I bit my tongue and for a lot of times. And then as you know, I've been single with no children most of my life, and so like I was always the guy. Okay, I'll be the person that stands up. I'll be the person that moves on and say this isn't right. Did I change a lot of things? Probably not, but you know, you know, it's one of those things, my Jerry Maguire moment, who's coming with me kind of things. Like I was happy to do that. To me, it's better to be able to sleep at night than like, you know, have the money in my pocket. And so I was able to do that. The beauty now is, you know, I did this before and I upskilled myself and I made sure I had a new position before I actually left. But now you can use these tools to say, hey, I hate my job. I hate what they're doing with me. Tell an LM prompt, how can I differentiate myself over the next 6 months? Give me a training regimen. I want to focus in this specific area. Give me a training regimen over that. And again, it'll get you about 80% there to give you that roadmap to upskill yourself, build out your portfolio, have something to show off. You know, say, hey, I want to create a LinkedIn post that's really engaging every week that shows off my portfolio. And you can, again, help build, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's a terrible term, but it's the reality now. Everyone who has a cell phone, which is nearly every single American, even the poorest of Americans have a cell phone or a smartphone. Most, the overwhelming majority of them, you have access to these tools. Utilize those to help do that for you, and that's the best advice I could give personally.
Yeah, yeah. Build a roadmap. Like you can literally ask these tools, help build a roadmap for me to get out of XYZ, whatever the situation might be. Yeah, I completely agree.
That's great. Again, I think we could probably talk all day. So maybe we start winding things down though. And I again, I think from that perspective is, can we just end here on like what you see as the designer's role as a bridge between AI and users? Because we, much like you've talked about, we have discovery sessions. You guys do too. You have feedback loops and things. How can a designer again help differentiate themselves using these tools, but also to differentiate themselves from these tools in those one-on-one discussions and to, you know, put the what we say customer first or give it that extra level of touch. We're a boutique, we do white glove service. Like we know what we do is not special, how we do it is special. And I think from a designer's perspective, that's probably pretty similar to what you guys are striving for as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to storytelling too. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that's the biggest differentiator is because when speed is commoditized, like it is with AI tools, the biggest differentiator is going to be how you communicate your findings, how you communicate your designs, how you socialize that with other people, and how you show up. And that goes back to the previous question too about ethics and how designers show up and what they might do in these situations. Being able to tell those stories is super 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 important, because it is the ultimate differentiator, I believe, is how you tell those stories. So it's storytelling, communication.
Yeah, and one reason that we work a lot with blue collar. We're in Houston, Texas, so we work a lot with blue collar workers, oil and gas, construction engineering. Just we fall naturally in that. We love that because it's like a spit and handshake kind of like they very much want to have that human interaction. They want to look you in the eyes. We need to. They're the ones that face to face. Like I've worked remote since before COVID, but like when it comes to closing those jobs, like they want to have that face to face and understand that they can trust the person that's across from them. As I personally, I would say find your way that you can do that. Not everybody can meet face to face and those sorts of things, but much like you said, you be that the differentiator is that extra little effort. You know, everybody can come up with a, you know, project plan through AI, like be the one that does it, but caters it specific and provides more insights and more things to help folks. I think just find that's the beauty is you can use these tools to help differentiate yourself as well. Again, don't use it to just print out everything for you. And this differentiated myself, I just inundated you with more information, but help it, you know, figure out a way that you can differentiate yourself. And that user story that you talk about, storytelling is very important that we've learned from sales perspective as well. When we first started a company, nobody knew who we were. I had worked at Microsoft before, so people kind of understood like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's worked at enterprise scale and things like that. But like we had to refine that story over, you know, it's nearly 3 years now, and we continually refine that story and learn more from each folks as we ask them like, what did you like about us? What gave you pause? Like, and don't do that by like my recommendation. Don't do that by like a survey. Just literally ask them
Yeah,
that
have a
question.
conversation.
Yeah, have a conversation, and you're going to get more realistic. I mean, more genuine answers. I think, and it'll help you grow.
Yep, agreed.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, you know, I think I could chat with you all day. You know, there's a lot of things I could keep. I think we could keep going on, but I think you've given folks a good framework of how this is going to affect design, how it's going to affect designers, how the human touch is really important. So, you know, mine, I'd like to just jump into our you know, kind of like quick fire round at the end to kind of just ask you a couple questions and see what comes off the top of your head.
Sure, let's do it.
So, you know, again, we've kind of talked about this before, but let's say there's a parent out there who has an artistic child who wants to just kind of prepare them for what's coming. What advice would you give them, or tools, or any way that you could say to help embrace this, but also help make sure that they maintain the foundational aspect of it. We see this in the coding space, right? People are vibe coding, but they don't understand the basics of object oriented programming. So they're creating some dangerous stuff. But from a design perspective, what would your advice be to either up and coming artists or just parents who see that's something where their children are learning, leaning, but where they can come up?
I'd say keep focused on the fundamentals of whatever the craft is, whether it's artistic or it's, user experience design. Keep focusing on learning and practicing those fundamental tasks. AI isn't going anywhere. Like, you will always be able to use these tools. They're not going anywhere. And so it's sort of like with social media and devices and everything. They're not going anywhere. So there's no need to jump into that stuff right now and go headfirst into all of that. So I would just say keep the fundamentals down. Do sketches, do drawings, like make sure that you are able to express what's in your head through sort of natural means, whether that's writing or sketching or whatever it is. And then you can go and try these other tools. But as a first step, keep that focus.
And so, are there any design standards or design practices just off the top of your head, like 80-20 rule, those types of, I mean, the golden ratio, any kind of those things from that perspective that you can guide them on, or any tool sets out there or websites that could help guide them on that,
Oh, let's see here.
or anything like even color standards? I know there's colors and other color standard websites. So just I'm trying to think of questions I would have as I'm going through this, and I don't want to refer to AI and just get like the top Reddit post kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think of anything for color or anything like that, but I know Adobe Color Wheel, that's a pretty popular tool. You look that up, you can kind of get different different color palettes and everything. Trying to think. I would explore, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Framer. Framer's a great tool just in terms of exploring how different devices change the design, responsive design, things like that.
That's awesome. I think those are some great things that we can give folks with. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there too. I know it wasn't in our. Is this something I thought up at the end and thought maybe we could have a couple extra tools that throw at people? And I think that's a great place to start.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and I guess and we can end on like one piece of advice for companies or designers hesitant to embrace AI.
I would ask yourself why you're hesitant. What are you afraid of? We almost always operate out of a place of fear or excitement. And so, what are we afraid of? What are you excited about? And what are you afraid of? And sort of do a little bit of your own retrospective on what's going on with you. And then ask yourself, if you're afraid of something, what can you do to change it? And if you're excited about something, ask yourself if you're ready for it. Because
Great
that's the other
advice.
thing is there's a lot of people who are excited about AI and what it can do. There's a lot of people who are not ready for it. And by people, I mean, there's a lot of companies that are not ready for it and they don't know how to prepare themselves for it. But on an individual level, I would just say if you're afraid, ask yourself why and see if you can do something about it. If you can't do something about it, try and let it go and then move forward on what you can control and what you are excited about.
Awesome. And then, so one final question: we're involved with some local, Texas A&M and University of Houston. And there's some places in Houston we go from an AI perspective where we have AI meetups, the Houston AI Club, things like that. From a designer perspective, is there a place you would recommend people go to try to find locals in their area that they can have these one-on-one conversations and those things? Again, I don't know where designers kind of meet up, or like, is there a meetup.com or are there LinkedIn groups for, specific, or any ones that you rely on or are involved in your local area?
Not well, there's this place called Venture Lane. It's not necessarily design specific, but it's basically just a startup and innovation hub in Boston. That's a great place to meet some creative thinkers. And I've met some really great people there just across the startup ecosystem. In terms of design, I actually have been finding a lot of community online. There's this Slack workspace called Designers Group for Good. That's one of them. There's another one called Work on Climate. I'm a part of that because I'm really focused on trying to make an impact in the climate tech space.
Awesome.
There's another one called the Now Work, and again, these are all digital Slack workspaces that you can be a part of to meet like-minded people.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Because again, I'm probably going to join. I just have to pull up design gigs for good right now. It's good to know that there are things out there and areas out there that folks can understand. Because again, much in this especially entrepreneurial space, people are going to be wearing multiple different hats. They're going to have to put a designer hat on until they can afford to hire designers like yourselves to help build them and scale their business. And so I think that's great information. So thank you again. We'll include everything we've talked about on this episode. All the tools and everything will be linked as resources in our newsletter that comes out the Monday that this is released on LinkedIn. So if you're looking for that, just go to linktree.com/digitalmeld. You'll get access to all the different areas that the podcast is available. It's available on YouTube and Spotify in video and audio everywhere else. But the newsletter is a great resource because it gives us access to all that information, the great things that Lucas has told us about. And so, Lucas, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you having here. So I'm just going to open the floor to you for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, however you like to talk, and let people know about yourself, where they can find you. Can they, get a hold of you and have a 30-minute, consultation, that kind of thing, and tell us more about Finnick Design, and just open the floor to you and let you you say what you'd like to say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you want to learn more about my design studio, you can go to www.fennick.design. There's no .com or anything. It's just fennick.design. And like I said before, we're really trying to focus on climate tech solutions in the climate tech space. Really want to use AI tools in service of people and doing some of these user research processes. We also focus on Salesforce ecosystem design. So we're certified in Salesforce and have worked on a number of projects on the platform. Other thing I would just say is reach out anytime. Yeah, you can book a meeting with me on my website. It's always available, and looking forward to hearing from you all.
Yeah, and so we'll have links to everything, including Lucas's LinkedIn and Finnick.design, and that's FENNEC.design. Again, we'll have this all in the video if you're listening, or in the show notes and in the newsletter. Thanks again for joining us, Lucas. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate that there's folks like yourself who are using AI for good. I think it's going to take the village of us to make sure that we guide this tool to where it can go, and that it doesn't go off the deep end. And I think it's going to take folks all constantly pushing back against that. And it's really great to, as I continue to have these conversations week after week, to know that there are just so many brilliant people out there with extremely impressive experience and backgrounds who are helping fight the good fight. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me, and really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. So thanks again for this great episode, and for tuning in. As we said, linktree.com/digitalmeld. At the very top of that is the newsletter link, and then all the other places you can find this podcast, including our website and our contact form. If you'd like to be on the podcast, please reach out to us, digitalmeld.io/contact, or just hit up Linktree and you can see the link to that as well. We love having conversations like this. We want to hear about your story. We need your feedback, and we need your support. And so thank you so much again, Lucas. And until next week, we'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.